The wreckage drifted through the dark space like broken bones scattered across a black floor. Metal twisted into strange shapes. Glass floated in small pieces that caught the light from distant stars. Among all this destruction, the Kashari rescue ship moved slowly and carefully, searching for survivors. Inside the rescue ship's command center, Captain Thera watched the screens with sad eyes. Her golden fur was streaked with silver and her ears stayed flat against her head. She had seen many terrible things in her years of rescue work, but human ships always affected her differently. Humans were so new to the galaxy, so full of hope and energy. To see their ships broken like this felt wrong. "Captain, we found someone," her scanner operator called out. "One life sign. Very weak." Thera's ears perked up immediately. "Bring them in, carefully." The rescue team worked quickly. They cut through the damaged hull of what remained of the human transport ship called Perseverance. Inside, they found a human woman floating in the emergency medical pod. The pod had kept her alive, but barely. Her dark hair floated around her face like a cloud. Her uniform was torn and stained with dried blood. "She's the only one," the rescue team leader reported, his voice heavy with sorrow. The rest of the crew, they didn't make it. They brought the human woman to the medical bay. Dr. Ross, the ship's medical officer, began working on her immediately. His paws moved with practiced skill as he connected the human to their medical equipment. The machines beeped and hummed, translating human biology into something the Kashari systems could understand. "Her body is healing," Ross said after an hour of work. "But her mind—" "I can sense great pain there." "Great loss," Thera nodded slowly. She had heard about humans and their strange relationship with grief. They could carry enormous pain inside them and still function, still work, still fight. It disturbed many species in the galaxy. The Kashari found it particularly difficult to understand. "Keep her comfortable," Thera ordered. "When she wakes, we will help her however we can." But there was another problem on the ship, and it was getting worse every day. In the nursery section of the rescue vessel, 5 Kashari cubs were slowly dying of sadness. Their parents had been miners, killed 3 weeks ago when their station suffered a catastrophic failure. The cubs had been brought aboard for transport to relatives on the Kashari homeworld, but the journey was long. Too long for cubs without parents. The cubs were all different sizes and colors. The oldest, Tala, had deep brown fur with golden patches. She tried to be brave for the younger ones, but her eyes were always wet with tears. Nico was soft gray and gentle, always pressing close to the others for comfort. Zara had bright orange fur and would have been curious and playful in better times. The twins, Kes and Ven, were small and spotted, and they had stopped eating properly days ago. Kashari cubs needed the presence of parents to survive. Not just food and water and warmth, but something deeper. They needed to hear the heartbeat of an adult who cared for them. They needed to feel the vibrations of purring. They needed to know they were safe and protected. Without these things, cubs would fade away, becoming weaker and sadder until they simply stopped living. The caretakers tried everything. They played recordings of purring. They held the cubs and rocked them. They sang the old songs that Kashari parents sang to their children. But it wasn't enough. The cubs needed something real, something alive, something their instincts could recognize as safety. "They're not eating again," one caretaker reported to Captain Thera. Her ears drooped with worry. "The twins are especially weak. I don't think they'll survive another week." Thera felt her heart breaking. She wanted to help them, wanted to hold them and comfort them, but Kashari culture had strict rules. Adults who were not parents or close family could provide care, but not the deep physical comfort that cubs needed. It was about maintaining proper boundaries, about respecting the parent-cub bond. To cross those lines, even to save a cub's life, went against everything their society had built. "Continue doing what you can," Thera said, though her voice was weak. She didn't know what else to say. That night, the human woman woke up. Mira Chen opened her eyes and saw a ceiling she didn't recognize. For a moment, she felt confused. Then everything came flooding back. The attack, the raiders firing on their ship, the captain ordering everyone to the escape pods, the explosion that killed half the crew instantly, her desperate attempt to save the others. The moment she realized she was the only one left, she sat up quickly, her breath coming in short gasps. Her hands shook. The medical equipment around her beeped in alarm. Dr. Ross appeared beside her within seconds. "Please be calm," he said in his accented but clear English. "You are safe. You are on a Kashari rescue ship. Mira looked at him. She had seen Kashari before, of course. They looked like large cats that walked upright, with intelligent eyes and graceful movements. This one wore the symbols of a medical officer. My crew, she said, her voice rough. Are any of them? I am sorry, Roz said gently. You were the only survivor. Mira closed her eyes. She had known, really. She had known the moment she woke up in the emergency pod. But hearing it made it real in a way that hurt like a physical wound. How long was I unconscious? She asked. 2 days. Your injuries were serious, but you are healing well. Humans are remarkably resilient. Mira didn't feel resilient. She felt broken inside, but she had training for this. Years of work as an emergency responder had taught her how to function, even when everything inside was screaming. You pushed the pain down. You locked it away. You did what needed to be done. Thank you for saving me, she said, forcing her voice to sound steady. When can I contact human authorities? We will help you with that tomorrow, Ross assured her. For now, please rest. Your body needs time to finish healing. But Mira couldn't rest. Her mind kept replaying the attack over and over. The faces of her crew. The sound of the hull breaching. The terrible silence that came after. That night, when the ship's lights dimmed to simulate darkness, Mira tried to sleep. She closed her eyes and took deep breaths, just like her training had taught her. But the moment she drifted off, the nightmares came. She was back on the Perseverance. The alarms were screaming. Fire was spreading through the corridors. She was running, trying to reach the escape pods, but her feet wouldn't move fast enough. Behind her, she could hear her crewmates calling for help, but she couldn't turn back. She had to keep moving forward. She had to survive. Mira woke up screaming. Her voice echoed through the quiet ship. Her heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Sweat covered her skin. She gripped the edges of the medical bed, trying to remember where she was, trying to separate dream from reality. In the nursery next door, 5 pairs of ears perked up at the sound of distress. The cubs heard the scream and something ancient inside them responded. It was a sound of fear and pain, the kind of sound that meant danger was near. In the wild, their ancestors would have heard their parents make similar sounds when predators approached or when the family was threatened. The sound meant alert, awake, protective. Tala was the first to move. She climbed out of her sleeping nest, her young legs still a bit unsteady. The door to the nursery was designed to keep cubs inside, but it wasn't locked. The caretakers trusted that cubs without parents wouldn't wander. They had no energy for exploring. No curiosity left in them, but that sound changed something. Tala pushed the door open with her small paws. The other cubs followed behind her. Nico stayed close to the twins, making sure they didn't fall. Zara's ears were perked up, listening carefully. Together they moved through the dim corridors of the ship, following the sound they had heard. The human woman's room was easy to find. The door was partially open, and they could hear her breathing inside. Fast breathing, scared breathing. Tala peeked around the doorframe. Mira was sitting up in the medical bed, her arms wrapped around herself. She was shaking. Her eyes were open, but she seemed to be looking at something far away, something the cubs couldn't see. Tears ran down her face, but she wasn't making any sound now, just breathing hard like she had been running. The cubs looked at each other. Then, without really thinking about it, they walked into the room. Mira didn't notice them at first. She was too lost in her memories, in the nightmare that still felt so real. But then she felt something soft brush against her leg. She looked down and saw 5 small Kashari cubs standing beside her bed. They were looking up at her with large, worried eyes. "What are you?" Mira started to say, but her voice came out strange and broken. Tala made a small chirping sound. Then she jumped onto the bed. The others followed immediately. They climbed up the medical blankets, their small claws getting caught in the fabric. Within moments, all 5 cubs were on the bed with Mira. Mira didn't know what to do. She had never been this close to Kashari cubs before. They were so small, so soft. Their fur was warm against her skin. They pushed against her, climbing onto her lap, pressing their bodies close to hers. Then something even stranger happened. The cubs arranged themselves around her and pressed their small heads against her chest, right over her heart. Mira's heart was still pounding from the nightmare. The cubs could feel it. They could feel the rapid beating, the fear response, the adrenaline, and instead of being frightened by it, they seemed to relax. Their small bodies went soft against hers. Their breathing slowed down. One of them, the gray one, began to purr quietly. Mira sat very still. She didn't understand what was happening, but something about the weight of these small creatures against her chest made the nightmare feel less real. The warmth of their bodies pushed away some of the cold fear inside her. Slowly, carefully, she put her arms around them. The cubs pressed closer. Mira felt something break inside her chest, but in a good way, like a frozen river cracking in spring. Tears came again, but different tears this time. She held the cubs gently and let herself cry. Really cry for the first time since the attack. The cubs stayed with her. They didn't run away from her grief. They didn't tell her to be strong or to stop crying. They just pressed their small heads against her chest and listened to her heartbeat gradually slow down. Eventually, Mira's breathing became normal again. The nightmare faded away. The fear loosened its grip on her throat. She looked down at the cubs piled on her lap and chest. They had all fallen asleep. Their small faces were peaceful, their whiskers twitching slightly as they dreamed. For the first time since the attack, Mira felt something other than pain. She felt needed. These small creatures, whoever they were, had come to her in the darkness, and somehow holding them made the darkness less heavy. She didn't remember falling asleep, but she did. And when she slept this time, there were no nightmares. Morning came, and with it came panic. One of the caretakers came to check on the cubs and found their sleeping nests empty. She immediately sounded an alarm. The entire ship went on alert. Cubs didn't just disappear. Cubs didn't have the energy to wander. Something terrible must have happened. Captain Thera ran to the nursery herself, her heart full of fear. But when they traced the cubs' path and found them in the medical bay, curled up with the human woman, everyone stopped and stared. Mira was still asleep. Her face was relaxed, peaceful. The cubs were piled on her chest and stomach, all 5 of them breathing slowly and deeply. They looked healthier than they had in weeks. Their fur was shinier. Their bodies were relaxed instead of tense. Dr. Ross approached quietly. He scanned both Mira and the cubs with his medical equipment. His eyes grew wide as he read the results. "Captain," he whispered, "you need to see this." Thera looked at the scan results. The cubs' vital signs had improved dramatically. Their stress levels were the lowest they had been since their parents died. They were in deep, restful sleep. Real sleep, not the exhausted collapse they had been experiencing. And the human woman's readings were equally surprising. Her stress hormones had dropped. Her blood pressure was normal. Her brain activity showed no signs of trauma or nightmares. "What does this mean?" Thera asked. Roz shook his head slowly. "I am not certain, but I believe they are helping each other somehow." One of the caretakers, an older Kashari named Mira, stepped forward. She had been studying ancient Kashari biology for many years. "I think I understand," she said quietly. "In the old times, before we built cities and created our current culture, Kashari cubs would respond to the stress signals of their parents. When a parent's heartbeat quickened, it meant danger was near. It meant the parent was alert and protective. Cubs would gather close to their parents during these times. The elevated heartbeat and rapid breathing would trigger a deep comfort response in them. But this human is not their parent, Thera said. No, Mira agreed, but her stress response is similar enough to what cubs would recognize. When she had her nightmare, her body entered a protective state. The cubs sensed it and responded instinctively, and apparently their presence calms her in return. Thera looked at the sleeping human and cubs. It went against protocol. It went against proper boundaries. But she could not deny what she was seeing. Both the human and the cubs looked more peaceful than they had in weeks. "What should we do?" one of the caretakers asked. Thera made a decision. "We do nothing. We let them sleep. And when they wake, we watch and learn." The crew waited quietly. Ship systems hummed in the background. Time passed slowly. Finally, Mira opened her eyes. For a moment, she was confused by the weight on her chest. Then she remembered the cubs. She looked down and found 5 pairs of eyes looking back at her. They were awake now, watching her with quiet curiosity. "Hello?" Mira said softly. The brown cub Tala chirped at her. It was a friendly sound. Mira smiled. It felt strange to smile. She hadn't smiled since before the attack. "Did you all sleep well?" The cubs responded with various small sounds. Chirps and purrs and soft mews. Mira didn't understand Kashari language, but she understood the tone. They were content. They were comfortable. She noticed the Keshari crew standing in the doorway watching. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to." They just came to me during the night. I hope that's okay. Captain Thera stepped forward. Her expression was difficult to read. Commander Chen, she said formally. We need to talk about what happened last night. Mira sat in Captain Thera's office feeling nervous. The cubs were back in the nursery, though they had not wanted to leave her. Tala had wrapped her small paws around Mira's arm and refused to let go until one of the caretakers gently pulled her away. The sound of the cubs crying as they were separated made Mira's chest hurt. Am I in trouble? Mira asked. Captain Thera's ears twitched. She was quiet for a long moment, her paws folded on her desk. No, she finally said. You are not in trouble, but we need to understand what happened. Dr. Ross was there too. He explained what they had discovered, about how the cubs were orphans, about how they were slowly dying without parental presence, about how Keshari culture made it difficult to provide the comfort the cubs needed. When you had your nightmare, Roz continued, the cubs heard you. Something in your stress response triggered their instincts. They came to you seeking comfort, and somehow you both found it. Mira listened carefully. She thought about the weight of those small bodies against her chest, the way her fear had melted away when they pressed close to her. They helped me, she said quietly. I haven't slept without nightmares since the attack, but last night after they came, the nightmares stopped, and they slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, Thera added. Which brings us to a difficult question. What do we do now? Mira understood immediately. You want to know if it can happen again? The cubs need help, Thera said. They will not survive much longer without intervention. But our protocols prevent us from providing what they need. You seem to be able to help them in a way we cannot. And they seem to help you as well, so you want me to? What, keep them with me? Mira asked. Only if you are willing, Ross said quickly. We would never force this. But if you are comfortable with the arrangement, it could save their lives. Mira thought about her crew, about the empty feeling inside her since they died, about how she had no purpose anymore, no mission, nothing to protect. Then she thought about 5 small cubs who needed someone, who had come to her in the darkness and made it less dark. I'll do it, she said. I'll help them. Relief flooded Captain Thera's face. Thank you, Commander Chen. Call me Mira, she said. Just Mira. And so a new routine began. During the day, Mira stayed in the medical bay, still recovering from her injuries. The cubs were brought to visit her. At first, they were shy, approaching slowly and carefully. But Tala remembered her. And when Tala climbed into her lap, the others followed. Mira talked to them while they played. She told them about Earth, about mountains and oceans and cities full of people. She told them about her work as an emergency responder before she joined the colony ship. She told them about saving people from fires and accidents, about how scared she used to be but learned to be brave anyway. The cubs listened with fascination. They didn't understand all her words, but they understood her tone. Zara, the orange one, was especially curious. She would tilt her head and make questioning sounds whenever Mira paused. Nico was the gentlest. He would curl up against Mira's side and purr softly, his eyes half closed in contentment. The twins, Kes and Ven, were inseparable. They moved as one unit, always touching each other, always aware of where the other was. They spoke in chirps and clicks that only they seemed to understand. And Tala, brave little Tala, appointed herself as Mira's protector. She would sit on Mira's shoulder and watch the door, her small body alert and ready. Whenever someone entered the room, Tala would puff up her fur and make a small hissing sound until she recognized them as safe. At night, the arrangement continued. The caretakers would bring the cubs to Mira's room when the ship's lights dimmed. The cubs would climb onto her bed immediately, finding their preferred spots. Tala liked to sleep on Mira's shoulder. Nico curled against her side. Zara sprawled across her stomach. The twins nestled together on her chest right over her heart, and every night Mira would have nightmares. They came without fail. The attack, the screaming, the fire, the moment she realized she was alone. But now when the nightmares came and her heart began to race, the cubs would press closer. They would push their small heads against her chest and purr. The vibrations would travel through her body, calming her. Her breathing would slow. The nightmare would fade, and she would drift back into peaceful sleep. The cubs, in turn, thrived. They began eating properly again. Their fur grew shinier and thicker. They played with energy they hadn't shown in weeks. They were healing, and so was Mira. But word of this unusual arrangement began to spread throughout the galaxy. It started with a simple report from Captain Thera to Keshari Command. She needed to explain why they were deviating from standard protocols. The report was supposed to be private, but someone shared it. Soon, scientists from various species were requesting information about the human and the cubs. Why are they so interested? Mira asked Ross one day while the cubs played around them. Because it reveals something about humans that other species find disturbing, Ross said carefully. Disturbing how? Ross chose his words slowly. Most species in the galaxy, when they experience great trauma, they break down. They cannot function until they heal. But humans carry their trauma and keep going. You have nightmares every night, Mira. Terrible nightmares about watching your friends die, yet during the day you smile. You tell stories. You care for the cubs. How do you do this? Mira had never really thought about it. I just do what needs to be done. The pain is still there, but there's also life. There's also work. I can't just stop existing because something bad happened. That is what disturbs them, Ross said, and what makes them curious. They want to study you, to understand how humans can carry such darkness and still function. The requests kept coming. Representatives from the Galactic Council wanted to observe Mira and the cubs. Universities wanted to do research. The media wanted interviews. Everyone wanted to understand this strange human ability. Captain Thera refused most of them. Commander Chen is not an experiment, she told them firmly. She is a person in mourning who is helping some cubs survive. That is all, but she couldn't refuse everyone. Eventually, a representative from the council came aboard. His name was Corix, and he was from a species called the Trellin. They looked like tall, thin beings made of crystal that changed colors based on their emotions. Corix watched Mira with the cubs for several hours. He saw how they interacted, how Mira would laugh at their play, how Tala would bring her small toys as gifts, how the twins would fall asleep in her arms, how Zara asked endless questions in her chirping language, and how Mira would answer patiently, even though she didn't understand the questions. Remarkable, Corix said finally. You carry great pain inside you. I can see it in the way you move, the shadow in your eyes. Yet you nurture these young ones with genuine care. They need someone, Mira said simply, and I need them too. But does it not hurt? Corix asked. To attach yourself to new beings when you have lost so many? Mira looked down at Nico, who was purring in her lap. Yes, she said honestly. It hurts. But not loving them would hurt more. And they've given me something important. They've given me a reason to keep going. That night, as always, the nightmares came. Mira woke with a gasp, her heart racing. But before she could fully wake, the cubs were there. 5 warm bodies pressed against her, 10 small paws holding her. The sound of purring filled the darkness. And slowly, gently, Mira's fear melted away. She looked down at their small faces in the dim light. Tala's eyes were open, watching her with concern. Mira stroked the cub's soft fur. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for being here. Tala chirped softly and pressed her head harder against Mira's chest, right over her heart. 2 weeks passed peacefully. Mira grew stronger each day. The cubs grew bigger and more playful. The nightmares still came every night, but they bothered Mira less now. She knew the cubs would be there. She knew their warm presence would chase away the fear. Then everything changed. It started with an alarm during breakfast. Mira was in the common area with the cubs, trying to teach them how to play a human card game. The cubs didn't understand the rules, but they liked knocking the cards over and chasing them across the floor. The alarm made everyone freeze. Captain Thera's voice came over the ship's communication system. All crew to stations. Unknown vessel approaching. They are not responding to our signals. Mira felt her body respond immediately. Her emergency training kicked in. She gathered the cubs quickly. Come on, she said, her voice calm but firm. We need to go somewhere safe. She took them back to her room and told them to stay there. Patala grabbed her arm with small paws. The cub's eyes were wide with fear. I'll come back, Mira promised. I just need to see what's happening. She went to the command center. Captain Thera didn't stop her. They could use someone with military training, even if Mira was still technically a patient. On the main screen, Mira saw the approaching ship. Her blood went cold. She recognized the design. It was the same type of ship that had attacked the Perseverance. That's them, she said, her voice tight. That's the same group that destroyed my ship. Thera's ears went flat against her head. Are you certain? Yes. Mira's hands clenched into fists. They're raiders. They attack colony ships and steal navigation data. They sell the information to other criminals who want to know where the colonies are. Why would they follow us here? Riss asked. He had come to the command center too. Mira closed her eyes. She knew why. She had been trying not to think about it, trying to forget, but the information was still there. The navigation data, she said quietly. It's in my neural implant. I'm the security chief. I have access to all the colony locations. They must have tracked the debris field and found your ship. They're looking for me. Silence filled the command center. What do they want? Thera asked. They'll demand I surrender myself, Mira said. If I don't, they'll attack. The communication system crackled. A harsh voice filled the air. Kishari vessel. We know you have the human survivor. Give her to us and we will leave peacefully. Refuse and we will take her by force. Thera's paw moved to the communication button, but Mira stopped her. Wait, let me think. Her mind was racing. The Kishari ship was designed for rescue operations, not combat. They had only basic defensive shields and no real weapons. The raider ship could destroy them easily. But if Mira surrendered, the raiders would get the colony locations. Thousands of human families would be in danger. She thought about her crew. They had died protecting evacuation pods, making sure others could escape. They had sacrificed themselves for people they would never meet. Could Mira do any less? I'll go, she said. I'll surrender to them. No, Thera said immediately. We do not give up members of this crew. I'm not really crew. I'm a passenger. And if I don't go, they'll kill all of you. There must be another way, Ross insisted. But before they could argue further, 5 small shapes ran into the command center. The cubs had followed Mira. They had been too worried to stay in the room alone. Tala ran straight to Mira and climbed up her leg, her small claws digging into the fabric of Mira's clothes. The other cubs clustered around her feet, chirping in distress. You shouldn't be here, Mira said gently, kneeling down to gather them close. It's not safe, Tala chirped loudly at her. It sounded like disagreement. Like argument. The cub pressed her small head against Mira's chest, right over her heart. And suddenly, Mira understood something. The cubs came to her when she had nightmares because her elevated heartbeat meant she was in protective mode. It meant she was alert, ready to defend against danger. That was what triggered their comfort response. An idea began to form in her mind. A dangerous idea, a crazy idea, but it might work. How long until they attack? She asked. They gave us 1 hour to decide, Thera said. Then we have time. Mira stood up, still holding Tala. I need to talk to your engineering team, and I need someone to explain the ship's systems to me. What are you planning? Ross asked. Something my crew would be proud of, Mira said. For the next 40 minutes, Mira worked with the Kishari crew to set up her plan. It was risky. It required perfect timing. But it was their only chance. She studied the raider ship's design in the database. Ships like that had a specific weakness in their sensor array. If she could make them think the Kishari ship was suffering a critical failure, they might get careless. They might drop their shields to prepare for boarding. This is insane, one of the engineers said. If we miscalculate, we really will have a core failure. I know, Mira said. But we're out of options. The cubs stayed with her the whole time, sensing her stress. They pressed against her legs as she worked. Their purring was a constant background sound. When the hour was almost up, Mira went back to the command center. She had the cubs with her. She couldn't bear to leave them alone now. Ready? Thera asked. Ready? Mira confirmed. The communication channel opened again. The harsh voice returned. Your time is up, Kishari ship. Give us the human or die. Thera looked at Mira. Mira nodded. This is Captain Thera, the Kishari said into the microphone. We need more time. The human is injured. She cannot be moved safely. You have 5 minutes to bring her to your airlock. No more delays. The channel closed. Mira looked at the cubs clustered around her feet. She thought about what she was about to do. It required going into a state of intense stress, deliberately triggering her trauma response. It required diving into her nightmares while fully awake. Are you sure about this? Ross asked, his medical scanner already trained on her. No, Mira admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. She sat down on the floor of the command center. The cubs immediately climbed into her lap. She wrapped her arms around them and closed her eyes. Then deliberately she let herself remember, not just flashes, not just fragments. She let herself fully remember the attack on the Perseverance, the alarms, The screaming, the fire, the faces of her crew as they died. The terrible moment when she realized she was alone. Her heart began to race. Her breathing quickened. Sweat broke out on her skin. The cubs pressed closer, responding to her stress signals. Their purring intensified, but Mira didn't let herself be comforted. She pushed deeper into the memory, into the fear, into the pain. She had studied the raiders' ship for the past hour. She had memorized every detail, and now in this state of heightened awareness, her mind began to work in ways it never could when she was calm. She saw patterns, weaknesses, possibilities. Their shield generator, she gasped out. It cycles every 43 seconds. When it cycles, there's a gap in their ventral coverage. The Kashari tactical officer checked his instruments. She's right, he said, surprised. How did you know that? Mira didn't answer. She was too deep in her trauma state, her mind processing information at incredible speed. The cubs pressed harder against her chest. Their communication array, she continued. It uses the same frequency as our medical scanners. If we flood their sensors with medical scanner signals, they'll think we're having a critical failure. They'll prepare to board instead of destroying us. That might work, the engineer said. When they drop their shields, Mira said, her voice strange and distant. We need to target their weapon systems. Just disable them. Don't destroy the ship. There might be other prisoners aboard. Even in her trauma state, even while deliberately drowning in her worst memories, Mira thought about saving lives. Captain Thera made a decision. Do it, she ordered. Execute Commander Chen's plan. The plan began. The Kashari crew flooded the raider ship's sensors with signals from their medical equipment. On the raiders' screens, it looked like the Kashari vessel was suffering a catastrophic systems failure. Exactly what Mira had predicted. They're taking the bait, the tactical officer reported. They're moving into boarding position. Shields are dropping. Mira sat on the floor, the cubs pressed against her. She was still deep in her trauma state, her mind racing through possibilities. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might break through her chest. The cubs could feel it. They pushed harder against her, their small bodies warm and solid and real. Targeting their weapons, the tactical officer said. His paws moved across the controls. The Kashari ship had only basic defensive weapons, but at this range, with the raiders' shields down, it was enough. Fire, Captain Thera ordered. The ship shuddered as it released a focused energy pulse. The blast hit the raider ship's weapon systems perfectly. Sparks flew across the raiders' hull. Their weapons went dark. Direct hit, the tactical officer reported. Their weapons are disabled. The harsh voice came over the communication channel again, but this time it was filled with anger and confusion. What did you do? This was supposed to be a peaceful exchange. Peaceful? Captain Thera's voice was cold. You threatened to kill us. You attacked a colony ship and murdered its crew. There is nothing peaceful about you. Mira heard the exchange as if from far away. She was still trapped in her memories. In the nightmare she had deliberately called up. She saw her crew dying over and over, heard their voices, felt the heat of the fires. But she also felt 5 small cubs pressed against her chest, heard their purring, felt their small paws gripping her clothes. They were anchoring her to the present, keeping her from getting completely lost in the past. Their engines are powering up, the tactical officer said. They're trying to run. Let them go, Thera ordered, as long as they leave the sector. They watched as the raider ship turned and fled into the darkness of space. Its damaged weapon systems sparked and smoked, leaving a trail of debris as it escaped. They're gone, someone said. The command center erupted in relieved celebration, but Mira didn't join in. She couldn't. She was still trapped in her own mind and the memories she had pulled up. Her breathing was fast and shallow. Her eyes were open but unfocused. Mira? Dr. Ross knelt beside her. Mira, can you hear me? She heard him, but she couldn't respond. The nightmare had her in its grip. She had gone too deep, pushed too hard. Her body was shaking uncontrollably. The cubs felt her distress. They pressed even closer, their purring growing louder. Tala climbed up to Mira's shoulder and pushed her small face against Mira's neck. Nico wrapped himself around her arm. Zara sprawled across her lap. The twins pressed their heads against her chest, one on each side of her heart. Slowly, so slowly, their warmth began to reach through the nightmare. Their purring vibrated through her body. Their weight reminded her where she was. That she was alive. That she had survived. that there were small creatures who needed her to be okay. Mira's breathing began to slow. Her eyes focused on Tala's face so close to her own. The cub chirped softly, a questioning sound. "I'm here," Mira whispered. "I'm okay." But she wasn't okay. Not really. She had pushed herself too far. The trauma she had deliberately called up didn't want to go back down. It wanted to stay, to consume her, to drag her under. "We need to get her to medical," Ross said. They helped Mira to her feet, but she couldn't walk properly. Her legs wouldn't work right. The cubs refused to leave her. They climbed up her body, clinging to her clothes, chirping in distress. In the medical bay, Ross tried to treat her. But Mira was barely conscious. She was caught between waking and sleeping, trapped in a state where the nightmares felt more real than reality. For 3 days, she stayed like this, lost in her own mind. Sometimes she would scream. Sometimes she would cry. Sometimes she would just lie there, staring at nothing. And for 3 days, the cubs never left her side. The caretakers tried to take them away. "You need rest," they told the cubs. "You need to eat properly," but the cubs refused. They took turns sleeping on Mira's chest. When one grew tired, another would take its place. They lapped water from bowls beside the bed and ate small bits of food, but they wouldn't leave. Tala appointed herself as the guard. She stayed on Mira's shoulder, watching everyone who came near. If anyone tried to move the cubs away, Tala would hiss and puff up her fur. "I've never seen cubs act like this," one of the caretakers said. "They're so young, but they're behaving like parent protectors." On the 3rd night, something changed. Mira's nightmares were particularly bad. She was crying in her sleep, her body tense with fear. The cubs pressed against her as always, purring as loud as they could. And then for the first time, Mira reached back. Even in her nightmare state, even lost in her trauma, her arms wrapped around the cubs. She pulled them close, holding them tight, her face pressed against their soft fur. "Please," she whispered in her sleep. "Please don't leave me. I can't lose anyone else. Please stay." The cubs pressed harder against her. Their purring intensified, and something inside Mira finally broke free. She woke up crying, really crying, not the quiet tears she had shed before, but deep, painful sobs that came from the very center of her being. She cried for her crew, for their families who would never see them again, for the life she had lost, for the fear that never went away, for the nightmares that made her afraid to sleep. The cubs stayed with her through it all. They didn't try to make her stop. They just stayed warm and solid and present. Eventually, the crying stopped. Mira's breathing returned to normal. She looked down at the 5 cubs clustered on her chest and lap. "Thank you," she said, her voice rough from crying. "Thank you for staying with me." Tala chirped and touched her small paw to Mira's face. It felt like a promise. "We're here. We'll always be here." 2 weeks later, the Keshari ship reached their destination. Arrangements had been made. The cubs' relatives were waiting to receive them. But there was another arrangement too, one that Captain Thera had worked out with Keshari authorities. Mira stood in the official government building, the cubs clustered around her feet. An official was explaining the adoption process. "It is unusual," the official said. "Keshari cubs are typically raised by Keshari families. But these are unusual circumstances. The cubs have bonded with you in a way we have rarely seen. To separate you now would be cruel to both you and them. So I can keep them?" Mira asked, hardly daring to hope. "If you agree to learn our customs and raise them with knowledge of their heritage, yes. You may officially adopt all 5 cubs according to Keshari law." Mira looked down at the cubs. Tala was watching her with wide eyes. Nico was pressed against her leg. Zara had climbed up to her shoulder. The twins were holding hands, looking between Mira and the official. "I would be honored," Mira said. The official smiled. "Then it is done. You are now a Keshari parent." That night, in her new home on the Keshari homeworld, Mira put the cubs to bed in their new sleeping nests. They were beautiful nests, soft and warm, made specially for them. But the cubs didn't want to sleep in them. "Come on," Mira said gently. "These are for you." "They're very nice," Tala chirped and shook her head. Then she climbed out of her nest and walked to Mira's bedroom. The others followed immediately. Mira smiled. She had expected this. She got into her bed and the cubs climbed up with her. They found their usual positions. Tala on her shoulder, Nico at her side, Zara on her stomach, the twins on her chest. "All right," Mira said softly. "But when you get bigger, we might need a bigger bed." The cubs purred in response. That night, as every night, the nightmares came. Mira's heart began to race. Her breathing quickened. The fear rose up in her chest like a living thing. But now she knew what would happen next. The cubs pressed closer. Their purring grew louder. Their warm weight anchored her to the present. And slowly, gently, the nightmare faded. Mira stroked Tala's soft fur. The cub chirped sleepily but didn't move. "We saved each other," Mira whispered into the darkness. "Didn't we?" Tala's response was a soft purr that said yes. The nightmares would never fully go away. Mira knew that. The pain of losing her crew would always be with her. But she had learned something important. She had learned that carrying pain didn't mean she was broken. It meant she was human. It meant she had loved people enough to hurt when they were gone. And she had learned that healing wasn't about forgetting the pain. It was about finding new reasons to keep going despite the pain. 5 small, furry reasons who needed her as much as she needed them. Outside, the Kashari night was peaceful. Stars shone in the dark sky. And in a small house on a quiet street, a human woman slept with 5 cubs pressed against her chest, their heads resting over her heart. When the human had nightmares, the cubs rested their heads against her chest, and together, they found peace in the darkness.